One of the first jobs I had on the farm when I was a young teenager was riding around with my granddad and helping manage the irrigation water on the farm. And we'd drive around and he'd send me over to refill a dripper on a well or turn on a relift or go open a gate a little bit or shut another gate. Spent a lot of time together that way, and learned a lot from him as we drove around the farm, and learned a lot of words from him, some of which I could use here today and some of which I might not be able to. One of the words that we never talked about on any of those routes around the farm was sustainability. But as I've looked back and I've thought about the things that my granddad and my dad have done on the farm, I found that what they were doing and what they were teaching me was sustainability, even if that word wasn't used. And in building some of the efficiencies into the farm that we've built over the years, I'm saying here that we've gone from an accidental to deliberate type of sustainability. And I think that maybe sustainability is just the word that the marketplace has placed on all of the things that the practices that farmers have held dear for quite a long time. So, and I think that the fact that the marketplace now values that provides something of an opportunity. I found this online. You know, there's the old argument about the glass half full or glass half empty. So it's a dear optimist, pessimist, and realist. Well, you were all arguing about the glass of water I drink it in regards to the opportunist. So my question here as a farmer is if we look at the marketplace opening up to things like sustainability, where does the opportunity lie? So I appreciate Dr. Bassey asking me to speak with him here today. And what it really did was force me to look at our operation and say, hey, what have we done so far, and what can be done with what we have already done? So that's a question I would like to use as we continue our talk here today. What have we done so far on our farm, and what can we do to move to the next level of sustainability with that? And I think that's a question that we can all ask ourselves. And I think if you look closely, you'll see you've done a lot of things that you may not have used the word sustainability to describe in the past, but you've probably done a lot of things that set yourself up in a position to take advantage of that. Our farm is about 3,200 acres of zero grade. We're 100% raw, so I don't know how to do anything else. My dad always says that you know, we've been trying over 50 years to learn how to grow rice, and you know, once we figure that out, we can move on to something else, but we're not there yet. One of the things that we like to do is collaborate with researchers. So if somebody knocks on the door and says, can we try this? The answer is usually yes. So another title that I considered for my talk today was If Guinea Pigs Could Talk, but I went with the other one. So the other thing that we try to do is optimize our water use as much as possible. In fact, we try to conserve and recycle and use every single drop that we possibly can. So what have we done so far? A little bit of a confession here. I don't know how to put in a levee gate. The farm was zero grade as long as I can remember, but some of my earliest memories are of my dad running the elevating scrapers to get the farm in the shape it's in now. And when I was young, cutting my teeth, learning how to drive a tractor, one of the first things operated was a dirt pan. So we spent a lot of time putting our farm in the shape to get there. And all that time that I didn't spend shoveling Ross levees, believe me, I'm more than made up for in the grain bin shoveling Ross. So, another thing we have is an interconnected canal system with float switches. We're almost 100% electric, so that we can maximize our use of surface water. So the groundwater use is only triggered if surface water is unavailable, so you're not using too much there. And then we try to monitor our water depth carefully, reuse when necessary, but dropping it off of one field onto another if necessary. And then we put tracks on all of our machinery so that we don't damage the ground, which helps us the following year to conserve water and to conserve tractor use and stuff like that. So bottom line is efficiency. What we see out of this is less labor, documented in some scientific studies, less water use of greater than 50%. And we've been able to do continuous ROS in some places well over 50 years. And even before Clearfield technology was available, we were able to use things like water seeding because of this to optimize weed control. And as I said earlier, we've got a lot more minimum or no-till opportunities. So the question is, if we've done this so far, so this is kind of our backstory that we were moving toward just in finding those efficiencies, where does that set us up to take advantage of other opportunities that are up there? And for us, the zero grade and some of the other practices made it very clear that AWD, or intermittent flood, was something that might work well for us. And so if we're going to look at taking advantage of sustainability, maybe what we need to do is find a way to measure and monetize the efficiencies that we've already built into our farm. And the carbon market that Joe was talking about earlier, and using AWD to access that carbon market just might be one of those places. So AWD, I think Joe spoke of pretty clearly, but it's just, at least on one cycle, letting the ground drop, letting the water not stay flooded on the field for the entire crop year. And it's been practiced for some about over a decade, just for the sake of water savings. Earl Klein later this afternoon will be giving a talk. I think he's done that for a decade now, and it works really well for him. Some studies document 20 to up to 70% water savings from that practice. Our interest in it is not just that water savings, but it's the fact that we may be able to tap into some of these offsets by reducing methane production. ROS provides 21% of global human energy calories, which is huge, and it's responsible for about 11% of global methane production. So it's one of the places, as he mentioned, that the market has shown that it may want to go to find some of these carbon offsets, and we want to be in a position to offer those as that becomes available. So this past year, we were approached by University of Arkansas and the Agricultural Research Service, and asked if they could do a study on our farm to actively measure how much methane was produced on a couple of different fields. And as we usually do when researchers come knocking, we said yes. One of the questions that was asked, we call these the spaceships that they put up out in the field. I think they've got a different eddy flow covariance out, is what they call them, but they asked if they could leave them there all year if there might be an issue with that. And first I said, no, I don't think so. And then I got to thinking, well, okay, we don't want to burn them down, so you're going to have to get it out and burn the field. But that's probably it. And then I said, you know, some of the duck hunters get out there and maybe have just a little bit too much to drink, and there's not a lot of ducks flying, that may look like a pretty good target. So they've taken precautions against that. But as far as I know, the equipment has maintained fairly well. And they were able to monitor one field that we irrigated normally like we did the entire rest of the farm. We planted everything the same, treated it the same with you know, nitrogen and herbicides and everything. The only thing we did different was we practiced AWD on one field, and we did the other one just like we normally would have. So the findings from that are coming together now is that there was a water use reduction, but it's still being quantified. That's part of the process that's still being done. But it showed that the field that used AWD was over 75% methane reduction from the fields that did not. So what does that translate to when it comes to talking about the tons of carbon that Dr. Massey was talking about earlier? It's nearly a ton of marketable carbon offsets per acre is what that created. And the good news was that on the field that we practiced AWD, we did not see any negative yield impact. In fact, it was a little bit higher, but as you all know, you can't attribute that from one field to the other when it's just a little bit. So the good news is at least there was no negative yield impact. The other thing that came up is it opened up a lot of conversations with people in and outside of ag to show that farmers, we've always done things that are good for the environment, that are about conservation, and that are about improving the earth. And we don't always get to have those conversations with people outside of agriculture. But this let us show that not only have we done that in the past as an agriculture community, but we're looking at new opportunities to do that too. And hopefully that you know, that speaks well to them, and they're able to see that that's something we care about. Some of the challenges is on the front end, at least, it required a little more management. We think that over time that might go down some. But it does open more risk, because if you overdry the field, as all of us know, that you've got the potential of damaging the ROS. So you've got to be very careful about that. The big challenge is, and what we're working on now, is the whole process. How do you verify on the market those carbon offsets? But we're working with a group now that we feel is we want to be able to pull that together. And so what is the opportunity in this? Saving water alone, if you look at the enterprise budgets for the University of Arkansas, and you figure 18%, which is on the low end of some of the documented water savings from AWD, you could save as much as $20 an acre just by doing the math on that. which is a big deal. But if you want to look from the other side, the revenue side, carbon offsets are currently being marketed for about $12 in some markets per ton. Now, how much of that comes back to the farm, we don't know yet, because we don't know entirely what that looks like in between. So that's not a huge number, but we feel like it's going to go up, and it may drive that practice if you're able to get some of these co-benefits that Dr. Massey talked about earlier. But another big question is, what is sustainability worth to the marketplace? Are there people out there that are willing to pay for that? Are there other opportunities that brings about? And I read an article just a few days back that said millennials are twice as likely to buy from brands engaged in sustainable practices. So what does that mean for the future of marketing? What opportunities might this open up is something that we're all looking at. If I could step back from that just for a minute and talk about the water situation in Arkansas and how this kind of fits into that. Some of you may have heard Dr. Henry speaking this morning about the Arkansas water plan. So under sustainable pumping conditions, only about 20% of the water demand can be met with groundwater by 2050. 2050 sounds like a long way off until I realized that my 3-year-old daughter will be just a few years older than I am when that rolls around. So that's a reality. That is the future that we can see now. This is the issue that we might face in some places in Arkansas. And what we'll see is a groundwater gap of about 7 million acre-feet per year. And many of you probably are familiar with the water issues in California, which hopefully are getting a little bit of help now. But I had an opportunity to fly over a couple of the lakes back a couple of years ago in the midst of the crisis. You can see where the water line's supposed to be and where it is. And if you add up the amount of deficit that you see in those two lakes at that time, that was about 7 million acre-feet. So what we're able to see above ground here, what could potentially be happening every year below ground in Arkansas in the future, and we have to find a way to address that. Now, my belief is that some of the water projects that we're working on are the way to address that. You cannot conserve your way out of an issue that big. But my hope is that with innovative approaches like AWD, not only can we save some water, but we can position ourselves to have more credibility to go to the people we need to say, look, we have to fund these water projects. And that is one of the things that I'm interested in this for. So the guiding questions back that we talked about at the beginning, what have we done so far? I would say that it's a good practice to sit down and say, hey, what are some of the things that we have looked at that makes us, that we have done in the past that make us more sustainable that we may not even recognize without thinking that through? And then how can we position ourselves with that for the future? That may not be AWD, that may be something else, but that practice alone can open up new opportunities, hopefully. So one of those opportunities, if you do want to do AWD, is participating in a group that is currently trying to do that in order to capture these carbon offsets. And if that's something that you want to do, there's a grant that is a part of that that's making some of that work possible. That doesn't mean money back to the farm, but it means that we're able to go after some of these markets and build the infrastructure that we need, and more acreage in that will certainly benefit these. So you can talk to me and I'll put you in touch with the people that can help you make that happen. So with that, thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Dr. Massey for asking me to speak today. And these are the individuals and organizations that did a lot of this research. So thanks to them as well. So with that, I guess we'll open to questions.
Can you stagger the wetting and drying between fields so that you don't lose the water that's on this one field and put it on a field that you're reapplying to?
That's exactly what we tried to do, and it worked fairly well. As you're letting the one field drop down in the summer, you may not want to lose some of that pumping time, so you don't have to catch up later. So we tried to stage some of the water in the field next to it so we could drop it in quickly. So the net pumping time was still decreased significantly, but we were able to do it on days ahead of time so that it was sitting there ready to go. So that's my hope, is that's what I hope we can learn to do on more places.
Mark, did not cost you more in herbicides? Did not grow up?
And the AWD cycle that we used was later in the season, so the plant was established and shaded out, so it wasn't to the point where we saw a breakthrough. That's a real concern.
if a person doesn't have zero leveling, do they still do it as efficiently, or is that zero leveling pretty important to it?
I mean, for us, it makes it a lot easier. I don't know much about other farming techniques, either fortunately or unfortunately. But Earl Klein, who will be speaking this afternoon, I believe has done it on straight levees for years and works very well. I think it works fine on contoured levees. But I think if you go into the contoured levees and you're looking for the carbon offsets, the California protocol would not accept that, but we believe that there may be plenty of voluntary markets that might be an opportunity there. So, and the difference there is, as he talked about earlier, is that if we can't meet all the requirements of the California ARB carbon offsets, there may be voluntary markets that have a slightly less strenuous bar to jump over that could still be just as valuable.
Brian, you want to talk about the price tags efforts to try to help with marketing?
Yeah, so it's kind of like his Mark's title. You know, it was something that we kind of fell into. A lot of research started a few years ago on sustainability of rice production, and we found that there were quite a few benefits to hybrid rice as far as nitrogen use efficiency, water use efficiency, and methane emissions. And so a couple of years ago, we came up with the idea of smart rice to try to capitalize on that, not only for us, but for our growers like Mark. And so, this concept of smart rice is combining things like alternate wetting and drying along with the hybrid technology to try to really get out on the edge of the spear, if you will, of sustainability. And so our goal is to promote this type of activity and generate publicity downstream to try to generate value for growers that are willing to adopt it.
Any efforts on the buyer side? I mean, so there's two parts of that equation, right? We have to have the thing to sell and then the buyer. What do you have a perspective on that?
Well, we've done some surveys, and 5 years ago, if you ask the question, are consumers willing to pay for sustainability, the answer is, well, they kind of expect that. Well, 2 years ago, we did another study, and we found that, in fact, there are people willing to pay for sustainability, and some of them are willing to pay a significant premium for it. And so we are talking, I mean, there is some discussion. The issue is, just like you guys have said, I mean, we have to have a valid third-party person out there to verify that these practices are being followed, so that you can get a stamp similar to USDA organic or something like that to go on a package, so that consumers can see that this is the most sustainable rice that you can buy. And so that's the next phase. That's where we have to go next.
Michelle, do you have any comments?
We're going to talk about this afternoon in the 2:45 session about a study that we did on Mike Sullivan's farm, putting this practice into practice, and some of the elements that we measure out of that. So just give a plug for that.
Jared, do you have any comments in the room?
I don't. Well, I mean, I'll add the contour levy situation. Certainly not the requirements of California notwithstanding. There's going to be relatively few fields that are contoured that are of gentle enough slope to really be able to accomplish it. It's certainly possible. There aren't that many that are in that situation.
One thing I'd like to add to the gentleman's comment about can you do it on precision level fields besides zero grade is the way I think you need to look at it. If you have precision graded fields and you have straight levees, you technically have multiple zero grade fields and with a little bit of slope in the same field. So if you look at each paddy with side inlet irrigation, you can treat it like one field, even though it's multiple paddies, which are multiple fields, if you want to call it that. If that makes any sense.
Anything else? Thank you very much.